Hey, what's up everyone? Aaron from Unison here today. Today I want to talk about a topic that I feel is heavily misunderstood, and that is mastering. And so when it comes to mastering, I've seen a lot of people, you know, they're just not understanding what mastering is. They're just approaching their masters wrong. They think that mastering is something that it's totally not. And so today I wanted to go over 5 common mastering mistakes and how to fix those mistakes. So let's go ahead and jump into the video. The first and most common mistake probably is that a lot of people don't understand what mastering actually is. They think it has something to do with the mix itself and making the mix sound good, all that stuff. That has nothing to do with it. So mastering is basically just bringing the level or levels of your song up to commercial level. And so what is commercial level? Well, commercial level can kind of vary all over the place, but everyone is kind of using things like Spotify and Apple Music and streaming services, things like that. And so they have set some guidelines for what level it needs to be at, but at the same time, I've heard a lot of music that is over that level. Even I myself in X and G stuff goes over that level, but it is a good guideline to make sure that your music is at least up to that level. And not like also at the same time insanely way above it to where it's clipping as well and gonna sound really bad when it's brought back down. So what is the level that all these streaming services are using? Well, it is around -14 LUFS. And so what is LUFS? LUFS stands for loudness unit full scale. And so basically what that is the measurement of how loud a system can go. And it's like basically the max. And so essentially, before everyone was using like peak metering, RMS metering, all these things, but now everyone has essentially moved over to measuring in LUFS because everyone likes louder things. And so everyone is just pushing things much harder. And so LUFS is the new measurement that everyone seems to be using. And so same for me, I also measure in LUFS as well when I'm mastering my own music, and you definitely get a much louder end product, but also it is much easier to kind of clip it and make it too loud. And so finding that balance I think is really crucial. So really quickly I wanted to show you this tool here. This is called loudness penalty. And so what you can do is you can drop in your song after it's been mastered and see if it's going to be brought down in volume for places like Spotify, Apple, etc. And so I have here a song of mine, and I'm just going to drag it in and just drop it in there. It's going to process, but not upload, it says. And we can see how much it's going to duck the volume down. So that way I know if it's going to be ducked down in volume or not. All right, so we see here, it is going to be dropped down a bit in volume. -6.5 dB is what it looks like pretty much on all of these. It's going to be, except for Apple. It looks like it does drop it a bit more. But overall, it's going to be -6.5 dB. And so when I play the song on Spotify, it still sounds fine. I mean, yeah, there's no like squashing. It doesn't sound compressed or distorted, anything like that. It still sounds great, but this can give you an idea of how much it's going to be turned down. So if it's like I said, a significant amount, maybe go and check your master again. Or if it's not going to be turned down at all and it has maybe a plus sign next to it, then go ahead and turn up your master a bit more, and just try and get like a nice level somewhere. And so I think going anywhere to where it's like -11 or something like that, then I think that would be a bit intense, and I'd be like, okay, maybe turn it down. But at the same time, since I do dance music and more aggressive music, typically that stuff is louder, especially for like performing and things like that. So you could also go and make maybe a version that will be a good level for like streaming services, and then maybe have a version for like DJing, playing out, etc. So that way you can have a loud version and a version that's not going to be super compressed when it's uploaded to distribution services. The second most common mistake that I have seen from producers is adding way too many plugins, or just adding unnecessary plugins on their mastering chain. I've seen people adding like reverb or delay or like even sidechaining their entire master. I've seen some very interesting things, and while it's good to go and experiment and try new weird things out, when you're hitting someone up and being like, hey, can you master my music? It's better to just take all that off, and it's not necessary, especially for someone who's learning mastering. And so all you really need are just essentially like EQ if it needs it, but hopefully you can kind of get most of the EQ done in the mixing process, and then maybe some type of compression. A lot of people use multi-band compression, but even that is just, you don't need too much. Essentially like a limiter, like everyone kind of uses a limiter, so that way they can kind of push the levels up without it clipping. And that's more or less basically it. Like, it's not too much. And obviously, there are some chains that are bigger, there are some chains that are smaller. It all just depends on your preference and the style of music that you're doing. But try and keep it simple, especially when you're first starting out. By the way, if you're digging the sounds that are used in today's video, most of them come from Unison's Essential series, which are free. And if you want to grab them and mess around with these samples yourself, you can click the link below in the description and you can grab them there. All right, let's get back into the video now. On the subject of limiting, the next mistake that I want to talk about actually is over limiting. And by over limiting, you can add unnecessary distortion to your track to where it just doesn't sound good. Like I do know, with certain styles of music that are more aggressive, you do want to add a little bit of distortion just to make it sound more aggressive, edgy, whatever you want to call it. But at the same time, if you're adding too much, then it just doesn't sound good. It's just going to make your track sound muddy and messy, and it just defeats the purpose. So just to demonstrate, I have here a limiter, and so I have it here at around plus 2 dB of gain. I'll go ahead and play the drop here, and I'll just raise this up just to kind of show you how it sounds. So if I go and start turning this up, as you can hear, it gets really heavy in like the lower end. Also, there's tons of just compression that's happening in terms of like squashing the dynamics and everything. So when you go and you render it out, it's just gonna look like a big sausage, and you don't want that. You do want dynamics in your song. And so that's why I like to just keep it subtle, like just a little bit. So, could even go at like right there even too. Like, you don't need too much. Basically, this is more so just kind of like to bring the volume up at the very end if it needs it. Most of the heavy lifting should come from mixing, and then anything else prior to the master, like say like a compressor, for example, if you're using like a glue compressor, multi-band compressor, anything like that to kind of just glue everything together and bring out some of the dynamics. And then this is just to kind of top everything off. So it doesn't need to necessarily be the thing that carries the song. It's just kind of like the icing on the cake. The next mistake that I see a lot with producers is that they think the master will fix their mix. And so they'll go and they'll use the master as kind of like a band-aid for their mix, and go and kind of mix everything by using the master, but that's not always the best practice to do. Going and having a good mix prior to having the master on is going to make your final product sound that much better. And so by making sure that you have a really good polished mix and then adding a master chain on after, or even if it's not a chain, it could just be like, one or two things. It doesn't need to be anything crazy all the time too. Either that, or if you send your tracks off to someone to get mastered, then it's always good to have a really solid mix to send to them, so that way for sure the product is going to come out sounding great. All right, and then the last mistake that I see a lot is thinking that louder equals better. And this is not just in new producers. I've seen this in even more like, longtime producers too, who have been doing things like, there are some professional albums that I've heard where they're thinking that louder is better, and because of that, it's resulted in clipping, and so then their just end product just sounds bad. And so louder doesn't always mean better. It's definitely good to have like dynamics in your song, have like the louder parts for sure, but also have like the quieter parts. And so by doing things like over limiting or just like pushing too hot of like a pre-master into your master, you're just going to get this sausage that's just going to, not have any dynamics. And so even the quiet parts are going to be really loud too. And so that takes away, I feel, a lot of the feeling and the character of the song, because, everything just feels the same in terms of loudness. And I think by having that dynamic and that variation in volume, it can make the song feel that much more special. So anyways, I hope this video gives you some insight into, common mistakes that I've seen in mastering and how to make your masters come out sounding much better. And again, even if you're just sending off a pre-master to someone, hopefully that'll give you better results when you're sending those off as well. Again, mastering isn't a super big process. It shouldn't take too long. It's just kind of the icing on the cake. And so don't overthink it when you're mastering. If you are a mastering engineer, or you're learning to master anything like that, less is more, I feel, and just spend most of your time on the mix. So anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you learned something from it. If you did, please consider leaving a thumbs up on this video. And, if you found it helpful, please comment down below and also consider subscribing to the channel. It always helps us out here at Unison. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.